Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, 5 Copywriting Mistakes to Avoid and How to Fix Them. Always helpful. My name is Jill, and presenting today is Colleen, and
Hello.
she is one of our team members in the marketing department. Just a couple things before we get started with the webinar. First of all, this is going to be around 35-40 minutes.
Sure.
We'll see how long it goes. And at the end, there will be time for Q&A. So if you think of questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the box that you see in the GoToWebinar window, and we'll be happy to answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. One of the questions that we get all the time is this being recorded? And the answer is yes, we are recording this. It will be up next week on our resources page at our website. If you're not familiar with that, we've recently redone it. So if you go to verticalresponse.com and click on the resources tab, you'll see recorded webinars there as well as guides. So there's lots of information available there. It's all free. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Colleen.
Thank you. All right, so what is on the agenda for today? We're going to discuss the difference between copywriting versus content marketing. We're going to talk about AIDA, which are copywriting principles, which have been around for a really long time, but some people still live by them. And then, of course, our 5 mistakes that you want to avoid. So we have grammar and spelling mistakes, saying too much or saying too little, subject lines, copy per channel, and testing. All right, so you can see here I have a picture of Don Draper from Mad Men, if you're a Mad Men fan. He technically on the show is a creative director, but he still works for an advertising firm and does copywriting. So according to Wikipedia, copywriting is the act of writing copy or text for the purpose of advertising or marketing a product, business, service, etc. idea. So the reader of the copy is meant to be persuaded, to buy that product or that service and or to subscribe to the viewpoint that your text shares. So content marketing. Content marketing is this umbrella term that really talks about the creation and sharing of content in order to attract, acquire, engage clearly defined and understood current and potential customer bases. So you're basically delivering high quality, relevant, valuable information to prospects to get them to take a particular action. So content marketing has benefits in terms of retaining reader attention, improving brand loyalty, etc. This image that I have here, this is from an infographic called the Content Marketing Explosion. That is done by Bluegrass Interactive. So you can see here, it actually talks about the most popular content marketing tactics that B2B marketers use. So you can see 79% of people do article posting, 74% people use social media. That does not include blogs because we have 65% of people who use blogs, 63% newsletters, 58% case studies, 56% in-person event. So you can see these are all different tactics for content marketing. And according to the Content Marketing Institute, 9 out of 10 organizations use content marketing. All right, so content marketing versus copywriting. So content marketing is the creation or sharing of your content, educational content for marketing purposes. So that's guides, blog posts, webinars. And the copywriting is the selling and convincing of your content so that your readers will take an action. So the two essentially come hand in hand. You need great copywriting within your content marketing so that you can get readers to subscribe, to opt in, to make a purchase, etc. Copyblogger has a quote here. It says, "Content without copywriting is a waste of good content, and copywriting without content is a waste of good copy." So you really need the two to come hand in hand. And Copyblogger also said that the thoughtful use of copywriting techniques in your content marketing will then get your readers to take an action. And that's really essentially how you'll build a large and loyal audience. All right, so these are a copywriting guide or copywriting principles. And just know it's a guide, but a lot of people live by it. So what's the purpose of your copywriting? A, attention or awareness. You obviously want to attract the attention of your customer. You want to raise their interest. So you want to focus on demonstrating advantages and benefits of your service or your product within your copywriting instead of focusing on the actual features. So desire, you want your customers to desire your product or your service, and you want them to think that it will satisfy their needs. It probably will satisfy their needs, but that is the purpose of your copywriting, to get your customers to desire it. And then, of course, action. You want your customers to take action and or purchase. All right, so let's get into the first mistake. This one might seem really obvious. But grammar and spelling mistakes. I have two quotes here. One from David Ogilvy. He was known as the father of advertising, and he was donned the most sought-after wizard in advertising by Time magazine in 1962. So a lot of people really look up to him and his viewpoint on advertisements. And then I have another quote here from Charles Duncombe. So he is an online entrepreneur, and he conducted a series of tests and studies, research, website analysis regarding grammar and spelling mistakes. So you wouldn't actually think that grammar and spelling mistakes would be a debatable mistake, but it actually is. Mostly grammar, not spelling mistakes. Those are not really forgiven. But grammar is a controversial topic because blogging and copywriting, for instance, have a very conversational style. And some people say that it's important to write the way that people actually speak so that you're resonating and relating to your customers. So you can see here this quote by David Ogilvy. It says, "I don't know the rules of grammar. If you're trying to persuade people to do something or buy something, it seems to me you should use their language, the language that they use every day, the language in which they think." So that is something to think about, and it depends on the type of voice that you want to have for your company or your blog post. And then Charles here, he says, when there are underlying concerns about fraud and safety, getting the basics right is essential. And that is coming from this whole series of studies and tests that he did. And he found that, in his figures that a single spelling mistake on a website can cut your online sales in half. And as soon as that spelling mistake was actually made, the sales went back up. So he said that you have about 6 seconds to capture the attention of someone on a website, and a spelling mistake could cost you millions. So grammar-wise, it depends on the type of voice that you want to have.
But I would say, I think that you could still write in a voice that's more like everyday speaking and still have your grammar correct.
Yes. Yeah, I'm definitely not promoting bad grammar whatsoever, but it does depend on your style, and you can still adhere to proper grammar. And this little excerpt here I have, this is actually one of my biggest pet peeves, a lot spelled as one word. But the oatmeal actually has a very funny infographic. If you want to look it up, it's called 10 Words You Need to Stop Misspelling.
The oatmeal actually, considering that there's a lot of different types of things that are going on there, there's actually a lot of good grammar and spelling resources at the oatmeal. So you can look at some really funny comics that he's got there, but then you can also learn something as well.
Great.
I find it to be a great resource myself. And the funny thing, Colleen and I write a lot here, and we do a lot of proofing here, and I keep finding so many things that I'm reading online or even in newspapers that have very poor either spelling, which drives me crazy because I'm not a great speller, but if I can see that it's misspelled, I'm like, please use spell check. Please use spell check.
Yes.
And also punctuation issues. I was reading a story the other day about Olympic events and the royal family going, and for the life of me I couldn't figure out who went to the event because they were using commas and semicolons all over the place, and I was like, I don't even know who's there. I couldn't tell because of the way they were punctuating it. So it, maybe having a more relaxed voice is great, especially for a blog. We always say that, but just make sure everything is being done correctly in terms of spelling or grammar, because it can come down to a point where people may not know what you're saying if you haven't correctly phrased everything in what your copyright says or copywriting says.
This is another infographic that the Copy Blogger has put together. It's called 15 Grammar Goofs That Make You Look Silly, and obviously none of us want to look silly. I've only put 6 here, so the first 5, which are really important. And I know a lot of these grammar aspects drive people insane,
They do.
but they are really, really important. That's why there's so much information about them on the internet, because a lot of people still get them wrong. So really just knowing the difference between your versus you are, it is versus it's, the 3 different types of there or they are, affect versus effect, that one always gets me. I always have to look it up, but that's okay, because you need to know that affect with an A is a verb and effect is a noun, and I always forget that, but I always make sure that I look it up first. And then we have then versus than. And this one too, the dangling participle. So a lot of people actually speak this way, but in writing, I'll give you an example. So in writing, it looks very strange. And the copy blogger actually gave an example too. So, and I'll explain. So the dangling participle occurs when the participle phrase that begins a sentence is not intended to modify what immediately follows after it. So I'll give you an example here. After rotting in the cellar for weeks, my brother brought up some oranges. So it seems like your brother has been rotting in the cellar for weeks. So you think, when you're writing that out, it seems like that might be appropriate, but just know that whatever you intend to modify needs to immediately follow after, because you don't want people thinking that your brother came up from the cellar.
Don't leave your brother rotting in the cellar.
Right. Yeah. So that was an example from Copyblogger, and that happens quite often. And so you can find more of these grammar goofs at copyblogger.com/grammargoofs. Also, there is a test, a really interesting test at businesswriting.com. It's called 25 Most Commonly Misspelled Words. I won't tell you what I got on it, but thankfully, we all have spell check.
Yes. Again, use spell check. It's really your friend.
Right, and it is actually shocking when you go on there to see how well, or how well you know the words, or how many you actually got wrong.
I tend to get the ones you have, well, maybe not 15, but 1 through 5 right, because my 6th grade teacher was just
hardcore
a stickler.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that and a lot. It drove him crazy, which in turn has now driven me crazy whenever I see it used incorrectly. But that was like pounded into my head.
Right. Well, and then I just read an article, I shared with our team an article about how texting is actually it's ruining everyone's grammar and spelling. So going back to the basics that we learned is important. So the solution for grammar and spelling mistakes. Number 1, simply put, know the rules. You don't need to have them memorized, but number 2, if you don't know the rules, make sure you do your research. We do this all the time here at Vertical Response. We have a huge editing team for all of our copy, and if there's something that doesn't look correct, we need to make sure that we research it and fix it. Don't rush. This is a big problem for myself, especially I have a personal blog, and since I'm the only one running it, and I want to get something out really quickly, if you rush, there's way more room for error. So definitely don't rush. Read out loud. This is a huge thing too. Same thing for the dangling participle. Might have seemed great when you wrote it, but once you read it out loud, you realize that you're leaving your brother rotting in a cellar, and you don't want to do that. So create a QA committee. We have a huge editing team here.
It's not that huge.
Well, for our company, we have a big editing team here. Yeah, it's not huge, but for us it is. But we do have an editing team, and every single person needs to go through that copy before it can, for example, a blog post, every single person needs to go through and QA it and edit it to make sure that it's as perfect as it can be. Give ample editing time. So same thing, our editing team, they need to have a certain amount of time, because again, if you're rushing, there's going to be a lot of room for error. So give yourself goals and a timeline so that you actually have ample editing time. Use spell check at all times. I think a lot of people actually forget to use spell check.
I think I do.
Because I feel like we are constantly just typing into things like, onto Facebook or Twitter or whatever. No one's ever using Word anymore. And sometimes your browser will let you know.
I was going to say, my browser spell checks.
Your browser will spell check for you.
I need help in that.
But for instance, in certain blog formatting, stuff like that, the spell check might not always work. So use spell check multiple times, especially if you're typing into something directly.
I do for our QA stuff because I'm on one of the committee members.
The huge team. Yes.
I'm on the huge team.
Great.
I tend to take whatever somebody's written and I paste it into Word. Because Word isn't perfect, but it can catch spelling errors and it can catch grammar issues as well, which I really appreciate because sometimes I can't catch those. It doesn't always know which version of you need to use, but it at least can catch some of those really basic things that almost anyone would see if you accidentally posted it to your blog or put it in your email or something like that. So I find that a really good tool for helping me.
Right. And even in HTML, sometimes your browser won't recognize it. So I've noticed even when I create, for example, an email, if I look at the text version, it'll give me, my browser will tell me exactly what errors I'm making because in the HTML, it might not always come up. And then again, invest in the style and be consistent. So if you are going to be more casual voice, then stick to that. If you are going to be more formal, more corporate, then you want to stick to that as well. The worst thing is having an inconsistent voice all over your page, and that also can, same thing with even the capitalization of your headlines. Are you going to do all caps or lower caps? So things like that people actually notice. We all make mistakes. It happens. And if someone points it out, actually be really thankful for that and then just fix that mistake ASAP. Because like we saw before, Charles Duncombe said that, one single spelling mistake on your website could cut your sales in half. So be grateful that it was pointed out, but, just fix the mistake ASAP. It happens. And then I have some favorite reference resources here. So we have Grammar Girl, who is great. Dictionary.com, I actually use that all the time.
I also use thesaurus.com.
Yes, yeah.
Because I can't use the word great in every sentence.
Yes. The AP style book that, I live by the AP style book as a journalism major. Made sure that everything I did was by AP style book. Copy Blogger, of course, is a reference. Grammarly.com, which is great and hilarious. Also, I forgot to mention the Oatmeal. Which
the Oatmeal is also good too.
Yeah.
Grammarly you can also follow on Facebook, and they have some really awesome,
really hilarious stuff.
I know it sounds like we have a lot of fun here following readingdictionary.com.
It is fun.
It is kind of fun.
All right. So number 2, saying too much and or saying too little. So this is a tricky one because we live in a world of information overload. But, we're getting emails, blog posts, tweets, Facebook status updates, etc. at alarming rates, and people's attention spans are constantly being pulled in several directions. But then it's also important that, it's important that you're grabbing the attention of someone in a very sweet and succinct manner. That's vital. But if you're not giving enough information, you're not going to entice your readers to take an action. So you can see here, I have some statistics. So the average email read time is just 15 to 20 seconds. So you would think, smaller copy, quick bites of information would be best. The average person receives 147 emails every day, and of those, 71 are deleted in less than 5 minutes. But then we also see in lots of statistics that long copy often outperforms short copy. So, and then I have 2 quotes here from some copywriting pioneers. So I have John Caples. He says, if your ad is interesting, people will read all of the copy you give them. If the ad is dull, short copy won't save it. So it's kind of a, do we do short information because everyone's attention span is short, or do we give them a lot of information? So also it depends on, is your copy boring or is it interesting? And then we have Claude C. Hopkins here. He says, the more you tell, the more you sell.
Yeah, I do find that first stat interesting, and I always wonder, because you never really get insight into how they do these, or not very much, but people spend 15 to 20 seconds on an email, but I have to say a lot of the emails I get, especially from like big retailers, have very little to read in them. It's a picture. They're telling me there's a sale, how much is off. And in my head, I'm like, do I need to buy right now? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, I'll say, okay, how much is the discount? If I'm like, I can't shop anymore because rule law is taking all my money, then I don't spend very much time on there. But I have to say the emails that actually have written content, I would spend much more than 15 to 20 seconds on it. So I have to wonder, if this is just averaging every email that people look at, and so it gets shorter, or what they're taking into account for that number. But I would have to agree a little bit on the. If you have a little more text, you can hold people in there a little bit longer than if it's just a picture that they're looking at.
Yeah. So, and this is going to go on for a couple of slides because it's very debatable. So we have a quote here again from Copy Blogger. It says, long or short copy, which works best? The correct answer, which usually drives people crazy, is whatever works.
Unfortunately, that's always the answer in marketing, isn't it? It depends.
It is, yes. So Copy Blogger had written an article, and they had quoted Bob Bly, who wrote the Copywriting Handbook. And he says that the length of your copy depends on three things. So he says the product. So the more features and benefit a product has, the longer your copy should be. He also says it depends on the audience. So certain people want as much information as they can get before making a purchase, which is actually very true of people online. So we tend to think, okay, I have 15 to 20 seconds, to catch someone's attention in my email. I'll just give them very short, blurbs of information. But people who are shopping online are actually looking for more information. And then the purpose too. So what is your goal? Are you trying to get a lead? Are you trying to make a sale? So generating a lead is going to require less detail. If you're trying to get someone to sign up for an email newsletter, doesn't need as much detail as, someone who's actually trying to purchase something. So this continues. So we have Bob Kemper. He is the Director of Sciences at Mech Labs. Mech Labs is it's one of the largest independent research labs which focuses exclusively on marketing and sales. So he came up with this whole thing about factors affecting your body copy length. And this is for a landing page. So he also says that the factors that affect your body copy have to do with the nature of the visitor's motivation, the initial level of anxiety about the product or company, and the level of cost or commitment associated with the conversion. So he says you should use short copy. He says it performs better when there's a low perceived risk, low cost, and low commitment. So same thing like signing up for an email newsletter. You're not totally committed, it pays nothing, or you don't have to pay for anything. He also says when the customer has an emotional and impulsive want-oriented motivation. So he says if you're looking to write high-impact copy, that's for short high-impact copy, that's for concert tickets or designer shoes, MP3 players, you can keep it typically short. But long copy tends to perform better when there's a rational, analytical, need-oriented motivation. So like insurance products or B2B offerings, something that might be of higher value. So of course you just want to you could take all of this information, but it's really you testing it out and seeing what works for your particular customers. But it is a mistake to be giving people way too much information. A lot of times I see email newsletters that could go on for days, and it's great. And if the information is really relevant and important and interesting, I will read all of it. But it's really understanding your audience and knowing when to give them a lot of information and when to cut it short. All right.
There's a mistake on this slide.
Of course there is.
I just noticed it.
All right, so mistake number 4, dull subject lines.
It's actually mistake number 3.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
That was the mistake. This is number 3.
Okay, this is number 3, so again, edit. All right, so we have a couple quotes here from David Ogilvy again. So he says, I try to write 20 alternative headlines for every advertisement, and I never select the final headline without asking the opinion of people in the agency. He says, on average, 5 times as many people read the headline as they read the body copy. So when you've written the headline, you've spent 80 cents out of your dollar.
Wow.
So your subject lines are really important. And then I have another quote here from WriteWire. They say that good copywriters make it their business to think about the emotional response of the consumer. So you really want to know how to get your customers to read it, read the actual email instead of deleting it. But the thing is people also have the ability to smell manipulation from quite a long, way off. So you want to make sure that once you do grab someone with that really enticing, intriguing subject line, you want to make sure that the copy inside the email or inside your blog post is also going to be something that they want to read. You could have a really enticing, exciting subject line, but if your copy isn't just as enticing, they're no longer going to be affected by your subject lines. They're just going to keep deleting them because they're going to think, well, the copy inside, and that always bugs me. If I see something that's really interesting and then inside is just kind of lackluster, I end up deleting those emails, even if the subject line is great. So solution to your dull subject lines. So target your audience. Really understand who your audience is and what they want. So again, you want to be relevant. You really want to look into the desires of your audience. And if you don't know, ask, so that you can be more relevant to what they want and what they need. And of course, you want to establish a purpose within your subject line, and you want to provide benefits. So what are people going to get out of what they're going to read or what they're going to open from your subject line, and you want to include value. Also, avoid vagueness. Sometimes this works because it piques people's interest, and sometimes it doesn't. But for the most part, I'd say avoid it. As much information as you can give them in the subject line and still entice them, the better than being vague.
That would also be a good thing to test.
Right.
Again, if you've never been to one of our webinars, testing is a huge thing for email marketing, and subject lines is one of the big things that you can test and easily test. There are some other things that are a little tougher to test, but subject lines, you'll really be able to tell if people are impacted by what you've written in the subject line or not. You can tell by your open rate.
Right.
So that one's an easy one to test.
Yep. And then, of course, you want to entice and ignite curiosity. This, of course, is easier said than done. But my rule of thumb is I would think about myself. Is this interesting to me? Yeah. No. Then, no one's going to open it. So really think about it yourself, too. Like, this may seem like a really great subject line, but would you open it if it was in your inbox? If not, then write 20 more like David Ogilvy does. And then, of course, your practice. So you see, the father of advertising had to write 20 headlines before he came up with one that he thought really worked. So consistently practicing with your subject lines will only make you a bit better. And then, of course, have fun with your subject lines. They shouldn't be a chore. I know sometimes it can be difficult.
Yes.
But they can be fun. And I feel like the more fun you have in your subject lines, the more fun that your audience and your readers can tell in your subject line. And we also here have a guide. This is from our resources page. Called Savvy Subject Line Writing for Success. So if you want to take a look at that guide, you can.
Again, it's free.
Yeah. So the real number 4, using same copy per channel. So what I mean by this is using the exact same copy for social media, the exact same copy for your blog, for your website, for your landing pages, promotional emails, newsletters. You shouldn't be using the same type of copy for any of these channels, because all of these channels have a different audience, a different format, even a different purpose. So you really want to make sure that you're not just copying and pasting the same thing into each channel, because it's not going to resonate with your audience depending on what they're following. Some people may only follow you on social media, some people may only look at your website. And same thing too, if you're copying and pasting the exact same copy in every single channel, it's not going to give people as much motivation to follow you in several areas.
But that doesn't mean that you can't use the same information.
Right.
We're not saying everything has to be fresh and new everywhere you go, because a lot of times what we talk about in a lot of our webinars is that you don't have to start from scratch when you're putting things on Facebook or on Twitter, but you have to think about how much space you have to put that in there.
Exactly.
So you can use the same topics and the same ideas, just reword some of your copy to work better on different platforms that you're using.
Yep. So the solution here, so social media, typically it's going to be short. Twitter, you only have 140 characters. So social media, that particular audience and the copy that you want to have there should be short, it should be shareable, and it should be conversational. Of anything, your social media is going to ignite more conversation than anywhere else. And they even said, like, for blog comments, sharing is the new blog comment. People aren't writing as many comments on particular blog posts, but they are sharing them, and they are making their comments on there, which is why a lot of people end up putting Facebook comments under their blog posts now. So it's really short and shareable, of course. Newsletters, for example, an email newsletter. These typically are more educational, they're more personable, and they're non-sales centric. So you have a sales promo, the purpose of your copywriting there is to get them to, buy. But your newsletter, the purpose really is for them to click, to look at more information, to watch a webinar, to download a guide. So you're not going to, do your sales speech in your newsletter. But you can still mention the same type of information. So sales and promos, these really need to be enticing. They need to be very action-oriented, high impact. So you could have, it also depends on the product, but shorter, shorter copy depending on the product, longer copy, but it still needs to be high impact. And then your website. So people are coming to your website to learn about who you are, what products you have. So you need to be extremely informative. So this is where you could actually use longer copy. But it does need to be action-oriented. Do you want people to purchase? Do you want them to sign up for something, for your service? So it needs to be very action-oriented. And this needs to be for customers and your leads. Because, for instance, you may just have customers who subscribe to your newsletters or just leads. You may have just customers who are using your sales promos. But everyone is coming to your website, so it needs to adhere to every audience. All right, so last one, not testing your copy. We kind of talked about this a little bit with subject lines. Again, another quote from David Ogilvy. He says, never stop testing and your advertising will never stop improving. So you can only get better the more that you test. And a huge resource that I use, it's an excellent resource, is witchtest1.com. They are constantly doing tests on copy all the time. So you can see they did one here about did longer or shorter copy increase conversions by 62%. You got to go to the website to find out.
Yeah, I think everyone on our marketing team subscribes to Which Test One, and we've talked about this before as well in our webinars on testing, but it's free to sign up for this email that they send out it's like once a week, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can go and see what you think happened. Sometimes it's for website stuff, like copy or buttons or things like that. Sometimes it's for email, but either way, it's really talking about how people are interacting with the stuff that you're writing. So I would definitely encourage you to go take a look at that. It's really fun.
And you can go to the website and specifically search for copy. So you can see all the different tests that they have performed and which one, depending on copy. And it can be about length, or it can be about, changing particular words or buttons. So it's actually a really great resource to look at copy tests. So the solution, obviously, conduct tests regularly. Here are just some examples. So your subject lines. We do this quite often in A/B split tests. Pre-headers, the length of copy, so short versus long. Fine print. This was actually one that I saw on Which Test One. I attended a seminar that they did, and there was a really interesting test in which people change the fine print. You don't even think that people are reading the fine print, and they are. So, I wrote a blog post about things that you should be testing but probably aren't, and that's fine print. So actually, people are actually reading the fine print, and it made a huge difference. And then, of course, your call to action. This could be within the, the copy or on a button, etc. Landing pages. So what type of copy you're using on landing pages. Overlays, that's where the screen goes gray and just one particular aspect comes up. So testing the copy on your overlay, and then even testing, does your audience like action, or do they like benefits, or do they like features? We typically say you want to advertise benefits, but it could depend on your audience. Maybe your people do like features or action. Yeah, and then style too. You can test the particular style, same thing with voice and personality, to see which one is resonating with your audience more. You could be super corporate, but your audience could be really casual, so that corporate tone or voice may not resonate with them. So really just testing, which of those are getting more results. So that really concludes the 5
Nice.
copywriting mistakes and their solutions.